What's up, everybody? So excited to be back here on Friday to kick off May with my girl, Lauren Johnson. Now, Lauren and I have met in the CEO Mama Mastermind. And from the second she started talking, I was like, yep, this is my kind of woman.
That's the greatest compliment ever.
I'll just let her tell you about her background and why she's such a badass in terms of really thinking about what it takes to have mental agility and have a high performance mindset as a parent, as a business owner, as an employee, as a professional. Get your questions in. Tell us where you're watching or listening from, even if you're catching this on the replay. We want to see that. And just thanks so much for being here. With that, Lauren, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about your background and then what you're doing today.
Yeah, happy to. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Let's see here, a little bit about me. My background is, from a professional perspective, is in sport and performance psychology. And it is really about the psychology of high performers, of how we perform at our best, what's actually happening in our brain, and how we can leverage it to achieve high performance more often than not. I actually got into this type of work because I was the athlete that needed it. I really pursued athletics for a while, and I played collegiate soccer. And I ended up getting injured my senior year, and it took me out of the game. However, I was still a part of the team, so I just played a very different role. And it opened my mind to not only how can I serve my team and not on the field, but actually how can I play a supportive role off of it? And then I ended up taking an elective course in sports psychology, and I fell completely in love. And I had this moment where it was almost as if a mirror was being held up to me. And I started to realize how much control and how much choice we really have over our behavior, over the way that we think, over how we respond. And I had this moment where I was like, who would I have been if I would have known these things? Keep in mind, this was post injury. It took me out of the game. And then I thought, oh my gosh, how many people can I help now that I do? And so that really is what started me down the path of sport and performance psychology and the work that I now do in professional athletics, in business, corporate, et cetera.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your work with sports and athletes, because I think that is such a sometimes easy way to grasp what you're talking about. So you've worked with the Yankees, you've worked with all sorts of people. What are they asking you? Where are you finding that, the edges that you're trying to help the most with athletes?
Yeah, it's honestly completely individual. And so I'll have, some players will come to me because they're struggling. But what I believe, and my late friend Travis said, he's one time, as he said, you don't have to be sick to get better. And so I also believe that then there are athletes that are just trying to improve their best. And so we work with people, whether or not you are struggling and you want to get back to where you were, or you want to improve some response. And we're also working with people that are having the best, season of their life. And then we're trying to get them to even better their best, because we know that, the best don't stop when they get their best results. They continue to make their best results better. And so a lot of times when people come to me, sometimes they have a very distinct problem that they have a lot of clarity on, and they're like, I want to change this, or I want to improve this. But there's a lot of times they go, we're essentially taking our company from the minor leagues to the major leagues. How do we do that? And how do we support our team? And that's something that I come in and I help support the mental side of performance alongside that physical skill development that they already have.
So can you tell me a little bit about this choice that we have to make? So you're telling me you're caught in the spiral. Like shit's just going down. Because I certainly have been feeling that. The clips and just like things have been happening in my personal life. So you're kind of like in that tornado of feeling. And we have a choice to make, right? And so many people feel that, right? How do I get myself out of that spiral, the negativity? And it's so hard, Lauren. There's so much negativity right now. There's just so much. What is your guidance? How do you help people through those moments?
Yeah, it's a great question. We always have a choice, but sometimes those choices can be forgotten. A gentleman by the name of James Nesmith, he was actually imprisoned. He was a prisoner of war. And what he realized, he was in solitary confinement for years. And he realized, I am either going to go insane in this box by myself, or I have a choice where I place my mind. And what he did is every day he played a round of golf in his mind, his favorite location. He had actually never played it before, but he had visited it. And so he imagined playing this round every single day. And when he ended up getting out, he ended up shooting a ridiculous score, I think like in the 70s. And he hasn't played, mind you, in years. And then he also had never played this course before. And he went and shot a crazy score. And so the idea is that you might look at his situation and go, well, he didn't have a choice. No, he may not have had the choice he wanted, but he still had a choice. And sometimes we don't have the choices we want, but we still have the choice to make the best with what we currently have. We still have the choice to improve based on the opportunities in front of us. So, you may not have the opportunity you want, but you always have the opportunity to improve yourself, whether it's the way that you're thinking, whether it's the perspective you're taking, whether it's the action that you're choosing, the boundaries you're setting. All of those things are choices. And so I think that one of the best things that we can do is remember that we become elite by choice. It is not by chance. And when we take responsibility of the choices that we make, even if they're not the ones that we always want, we put ourselves in the best position to achieve it.
That's freaking good, Lauren. Quote, tweet. So what do you think? I'm really curious. What do you think is one of like the distinct factors that creates that elite performer versus like, I like to say the A player versus the B player. And we think about that so much in organizations, right? You're working with your team, like you have I think there's that Harvard business, whatever, what are some of the values or, I don't know, principles that an elite performer has that one that isn't?
Yeah. One of the top things I noticed, or I have noticed with the people that I work with and the people that I've seen go on to do really incredible things, is number one, they don't feel sorry for themselves. Like when things aren't going well, they don't play the victim card. It doesn't mean that they have to like where they're at. It doesn't mean that it genuinely is a bad position. It could very well be. But when we boil down like mental toughness and mental performance, it's really about accepting your reality and choosing your response, right? There's the choice again. But acceptance is not to be confused with liking where you're at. You don't have to like where you're at. You don't have to like how you were treated by somebody else. You don't have to like the circumstances happening around you, or you don't have to like the fact that you drew this card and not this one. You don't have to like it. But at some point, if you're going to move forward, you have to be willing to accept it. And once you accept it, now you can begin to draw your path forward. But until then, you will continue to stay exactly where you're at and stuck in your role, because as long as you give responsibility to something outside yourself, you will always be governed by it. And so I think that number one thing that I've noted, that is a core principle of high performers. I would say another one is they are lifelong learners. Like they recognize that actually the more they know, the more they realize how little it is they know. And so they're constantly evolving and learning. And so it doesn't mean that they don't hold their beliefs strong, but they also allow for room for flexibility. So if and when new information does present itself, they are willing to make upgrades to their belief systems as a result of that. They're not so stuck in their ways that they're just unwilling to hear anything or upgrade or update their beliefs based on new information. And we see that, right? I mean, hello, it's an election year. We'll see it a lot where it doesn't matter what kind of information you present. Sometimes we begin to identify so closely with our beliefs that anything that challenges it feels as if they're challenging our core. And so the best performers I've worked with, best CEOs I've worked with, executives, leaders, head coaches are ones that are strong in their beliefs, but they're willing to update, upgrade, and evolve their belief systems if and when new evidence is presented. So I would say those two things. And I would say number 3 is they come from a place of love. And I find that the best leaders operate from the core of love. They love their people. They want to give to others. They love to see others succeed. They love the game. They love the pursuit. And so I think that when you see any high performer, you're going to find that core that they can always come back to of love.
Ooh. So love, learning, and acceptance.
Yeah, that's a good way.
And that's it. That's all you need to do. Like, it's no big deal.
It's simple.
You know, as you were saying all that, I was really thinking about, well, one, you know, both of us are business owners, and on, you know, that entrepreneurial mindset, and just you kind of inherently, no, not all entrepreneurs and business owners are like share with love, I think, but that idea of like being a learner and like accepting, but like the pursuit of the game, I think that's such a big, beautiful trait of, you know, founders and business owners, because you kind of have to be that way. And how much that's needed inside teams and organizations. When I think about corporate, and when I think about all the people inside organizations and how challenging it can be. So I was just thinking of that. And then I was thinking about parenting.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, how much more, how like applicable this is in actually being a mom or dad, and actually more challenging to instill those behaviors with your children, right? I mean, you're a parent, you're thinking about, how does this apply? How do we move this actually through as a parent and then to our children?
Yeah, well, it's so true. There has yet to be one keynote workshop training I've done with an executive team, financial advisors, with sales teams, where I've had somebody come up at the end of it and said, Lauren, let me tell you about my son. Or can I ask you a question about my daughter? This stuff comes up all the time. And as a mom myself, I'm super into just development, like child development. How do they learn best? How do we put them in the best position for success? Because Kurt Lewin, he's a psychologist from way back, like in the 1930s, 1940s, and he came up with this formula that I love, which is behavior is a result of the individual times the environment in which they exist. And so when we think of parenting, if the question becomes like, what behaviors are we solving for? And therefore, if we're solving for this behavior, then what skills must we teach the individual, and what must we consider about the individual as we're teaching it? Because everybody's different. Everyone learns different. Everyone communicates differently. So we have to consider those things. And then what environment are we creating, and how do we support this behavior in the environment? And so when we look at it from that perspective, I think that part of our job as parents is to not only help equip the skills for our children, but then also to become the environment in which this behavior can thrive. And I think sometimes we focus so heavily on the skill itself, and then we forget that modeling is a big part of developing the environment. Like, I don't know about you, but I remember when I was younger and I was playing soccer, I had this dad that always came up to me, and no, I don't, his name was Dan. And so no offense if your name is Dan out there. Okay. I don't paint all Dans in this way, but he came up to me and he would always be like, Lauren, you just got to believe, like after like a bad game. And I'm like, thanks, Dan. Like if it were that easy, like, you know what? I would be a belief machine, but we know that beliefs don't magically happen. Beliefs equal the way that we view ourselves, our identity, plus the actions that support it. So if you identify as somebody that isn't a good public speaker, every time you act in support of not being a good public speaker, you solidify that belief and you support that belief. I think James Clear says that. He goes, you cast a vote for the belief and the type of person that you want to be every time you take an action. And so when I look at that, I also look at kids and I go, okay, so how do we help them instill beliefs? How do we help them develop resilience? And it's a mix of a couple things. It's a mix of not only helping them to understand what's happening in our brain, understand what they can do to then achieve that, and then creating the environment that supports it. And so anyway, I'm really passionate about this because, raising a son of my own, he's a year and a half right now. I've been thinking about, how do we set him up for success? And what we know is the number one predictor of success in children is grit. And you can find that in some incredible research that Angela Duckworth has done. And grit is your ability to deal with and persevere through really difficult times. And so how do we teach that to our kids? And I think that it's a mixture of experience, opportunities, and then applying some skills as well.
So what is your perspective when like the circumstances and the experience are negative for kids, right? Like how do we know how good the environments are for our kids? Really, we're doing our best. We are. But you're saying so much is that experience that's happening and what we're creating as parents matters. If they're in the face of a challenging situation, how do we, as the parent, instill this idea of acceptance and learning and love, like into them to get past those experiences?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes the learning doesn't happen in the experience itself with the kid. Sometimes the learning happens when you go through your own experience and then choose how you respond to it. I remember I was working for the Yankees at the time, and they sent me to, I think it was actually San Jose. And I was assisting in the scouting department and in our amateur scouting department, I should say. And they sent me to go interview this player. He's coming right out of high school, and incredible player, man. Like this guy, if I was going to see them, there was likely that they were just incredibly talented. Like we've already checked that box. And so now I'm going to interview them to really understand the mental side of performance for them. And so we have a great interview. And at the end of it, the dad comes up to me and he said, Lauren, I just have a question. How do I get my son to talk more about his struggles? Like essentially when he has a bad game, when things are going wrong, he just shuts down entirely. He doesn't talk. He'll sometimes be reclusive, like he'll totally be on his own. And, how do we fix that? And I asked him, I said, how do you respond to difficulty? He said, do you talk a lot about the things you're going through? And he goes, no, I'm the worst example of that. And he said, well, it's no surprise he's similar. And so I said, if you want to teach him how to manage and handle these situations, you have to learn how to manage and handle them yourself. Because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but as a kid, there's been lots of parents or authority figures that would say, learn from what I say, not from what I do. And that carried very little weight with me. I would be like, then why am I having to do it if you can't even do it yourself? And so one of the strongest forms of teaching from a parent perspective is modeling it yourself.
Wow. That just hit home for me. And not just as a parent, but as a leader. Because I think it's the same leading by example, right? You want an
Mhm.
empathetic culture, then you need to be empathetic. Like, um, wow.
Yeah, if you want an environment that creates openness, honest conversations, then the question becomes, what does that environment need to look like? You need to create safety. You need to begin by modeling that behavior so that people on the other end feel that they can do it as well. Because a lot of times the inverse of that, like if you're not feeling, if you don't have an environment where people feel safe, like you kill creativity. You kill, like you absolutely shun people's abilities to admit when they when they make mistakes. You shut down question asking. Like those things are really important for very high performing environments, whether or not it is in your home, it is in your business, etc. So I always believe that if you're not willing to do it yourself, then you really have no business at telling somebody else that they need to be doing it too.
Oof. Yeah. You have to take ownership.
Mhm.
Ugh, and we so need this more. My gosh. And really every aspect, every piece of what we're doing. So pretty exciting because you have some things down the pipe that maybe you can highlight a little bit around this parenting piece, Lauren. What are you up to?
Well, I can't give away too much right now, but I am working on a special project. So if you have children and are interested in mental performance, then I highly suggest following me on LinkedIn to follow along as I release updates about this. And that's really all I can say, but follow along for updates. I will be updating you along the way, but I have some really exciting things that I can't quite talk about yet, but I'm so excited to be able to chat about soon.
And I'm just so excited because well, like as somebody learning from Lauren and as a peer, I feel like the most challenging job out there is parenting.
No,
I mean, it's like if we can learn how to be better parents and instill that in our children, then my gosh, I feel good about what we can create with our teams and on social media and like the ripple effect. So I'm really, really pumped about what Lauren's up to. And I know I'll be advocating and sharing as well. Um, as we gonna close out our conversation, Lauren, one thing I was curious about for you is, where do you think we're sort of like missing the mark? Like if you think about like high performance, like 10 years from now, right? So
mm,
there's most certainly the parenting piece that happens, but clearly we're still not hitting the mark in this area. And social media and online is like really great and not so great. When you're thinking about ways that we can do better, you know, for people listening, if I could take something away, you had so many good nuggets so that we can be more elite performers in the next 5 to 10 years. What does that look like for you? What would you say?
mm. It's a really good question, and I might reword it in a simple way because I think that sometimes we can create addition through subtraction.
Hmm.
Um, I was talking to my husband the other day, and he brought up the story of Jeff Bezos, and I could be totally getting this wrong. I'm repeating this via my husband, but he was saying that his team gets together and they begin to think about the future. And a lot of teams and companies are thinking about, okay, what's next? How can we be innovative? How can we iterate and make this one better? And those are all really good questions. and really good things to think through. However, the way Jeff Bezos does it is he actually asks the question of what will remain the same? What won't change? What has been consistent throughout the past 5 years, the past decade, etc.? What are the things that are perennial in nature that we know have been the same in the last decade and will continue for the decade forward? And so I would say that there's a lot of ways to look at this question. It's a fantastic one. And instead of adding, saying, oh, try this, do this, my question would be, what has your success taught you thus far? Because success leaves clues. And so what has remained in the last 10 years that you believe will remain for 10 years to come? And what are those foundational principles that have put you in the best position to achieve success, whether it's from a mental perspective, a physical perspective, a strategic perspective? What are those things? Because I believe that when you can get back to the basics of what works for you, oftentimes there isn't a lot of need to add. It's more so maintaining the distractions and being able to refocus when our focus becomes distracted. So I would say get really clear on your core, get clear on the things that make you you, that work best for you, and then you can begin to make iterations from there.
I mean, only you, Lauren, would deliver such a freaking good response. I mean, yeah, you're 100%. We need to go back to the basics, simpler, less is more. And I mean, I was thinking about for myself, and for us, it's all about human to human. Like, we just need to keep like people first, building relationships. That is never gonna get old. Like, never gonna get old. And then if we stick to that, we're going to be okay. It also feels good. It also feels good for me, Lauren. And then that affects the mindset. And I really encourage, if you're watching this or watching the replay, write in what came up for you. What are something you can maybe subtract from what you're doing and really stick to what is building your success. We'd love to know what's coming up for you. And more than anything, just check Lauren out. She has a newsletter you could subscribe to. You can check her out on Instagram. Follow her, of course, here, connect with her. She has such exciting work coming up. She is a total badass, as you can see. And I'm just so grateful that you came on to share just a smidget of your genius with my community. So, really appreciate you, Lauren. Thank you for hanging out with us and kicking off my May.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun.
All right, y'all. Well, write in. We'll see you on the flip side and have another amazing guest next month.